Hello and welcome to the aForm Show, the premier podcast for all things architecture and design across the MENA region. Welcome to your tribe. Today's episode is supported by SkyStruct, the groundbreaking construction and project management solution that's absolutely turning heads in the industry. They are bringing together architects, engineers, project managers, procurement, and essentially any stakeholder onto one singular platform. Yes, clients are included. SkyStruct is genuinely changing the game. Its tailored modules for construction management, inventory, labor, cost management helps streamline the chaos of construction projects. They are rolling out very soon in Dubai, but you as the listener can get in early. Drop us an email at hello@aform.studio and find out how SkyStruct is the future, and it is here today. Now, let's get into the episode. Welcome to the show, everyone. Today we are joined by Morne Pienaar, Associate Director of Architecture with the Cities and Places team at Jacobs Dubai. With a truly diverse portfolio of work, Morne brings a wealth of experience across the realm of architecture, urban design, landscape architecture, and placemaking. We are obviously beyond excited to have him on the show, so without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Morne. How are you today?
I'm well, thanks, Alan. Thank you for having me.
No worries. As always, with someone like yourself, I never really know where to start because there's such a diverse breadth of work. Where do you start the conversation? It becomes quite intimidating.
Sure.
So I would like to take it back to the beginning, so to speak, which is I'm always curious about how designers are kind of formed, how their design thinking is influenced, and invariably that happens, during education, but even after education. So in your particular case, because I obviously have roots here, and I feel I'm a bit biased when I speak to designers here, but you obviously have a lot of strong roots back in South Africa. So I'm interested to know, did the landscape you were in, the environment you were in, how did that sort of influence you as an architect and as a designer?
Okay, good. I think it's a very good point and a very nice starting point. I think I can go back to even university. I was first enrolled for a degree in art, and at a very advanced stage of my application, I chose to withdraw and pursue a degree in architecture. So all my friends went on and studied art, and I was the odd one out studying architecture. I think that played possibly a very fundamental role for me because I was always surrounded by other creative people, and even today our best friends are all artists, and I love being around them. It's a really comforting place, sort of left to center, as I said before we started. But for me, formative years, that's sort of very important for me, is that I was an architect, or I was studying architecture, but my social surroundings were informed by artists. And I very quickly understood that architecture is a discipline or a vocation that stands with one leg in art and one leg in science. And what was very amazing about that is that given that position, your creative process can't ever be wrong. The end product might be spatial and the end product might be quantitative or qualitative. When you're working with architecture, you're referencing yourself or your own position at that time as part of your creative and conceptual process. There is no right or wrong. So that was very rewarding. I think, being involved in universities, there's always a lot of rigor that comes with design and design thinking. And there's very much an inclination to say this is the right way or that is the wrong way. And I choose to see it as just different ways of approaching creative problem solving. So definitely that firstly informed me for my approach to architecture greatly, being surrounded by good friends who were all artists. And then I think our universities are very diverse in South Africa. We've got a number of really good universities, and they all have got different means of teaching architecture because of their local context. I can use an example. I studied at the University of Pretoria, and that's always been regarded as a technically very good university. So certainly the way that conceptual projects are realized up to the technical level has always been very, very strong. I was very fortunate to be in the school at the same time of a number of really good professors that really made a very big impression on me. One have become, I would say, in Afrikaans we say hartsvriende, so like a really dear friend, Professor Ora Huber. And another one is, amongst others, Professor Roger Fisher. And from Professor Roger Fisher, I learned sort of ecological way of thinking about design, an approach that is sort of very holistically focused and very holistically considered. And from Professor Ora Hubert, I learned that design it's okay to be self-referential. And it's okay, even with her latest project now in South Africa, it's amazing for me to see that there's so much of herself in the project. So it becomes a very, very personal process. And for her, amongst others, design is a very personal process, and it's a somewhat difficult process. It doesn't come easy. You get those very intuitive designers for whom design is a very intuitive exercise, and they're extremely fast on lateral design decisions. I'm not. I take long with design. I struggle with design problems in a very engaging way. So those two professors really informed. There were others as well, Professor Weegelen, Gus Guernicke. I mean, these guys are like the Le Corbusiers of in South Africa, really very instrumental in the forming of my ideas, or not ideas, the way that I approach ideas. And then I think what's very good to say is the University of the Free State is in the middle of South Africa in a beautiful, beautiful landscape. And the students have got completely different way of approaching design. At the University of Pretoria, and especially at the University of the Witwatersrand, there's a lot of focus on theory and urbanism, because these are universities in cities. Bloemfontein is much more of a rose city. You know, it's a much smaller city, and it's in the middle of the country. And students there rely on landscape to inform design, and definitely much more of a poetic approach to designing. Now, I'm very fortunate to be married to a very talented architect also. My partner for the last 16 years, and very, very significant contributor to the way that I think today. And she studied at the University of the Free State. She did a beautiful thesis based in Johannesburg. But that poetic approach to landform, landscape, and architectures was pulled through to a project in which he realized in Johannesburg on a reclaimed mine dump. The site's not there anymore. It was demolished, but it was called Top Star Drive-In at the time. So definitely I resonate between those two environments. You know, we briefly spoke about the landscape here and how I am intrinsically moved by the qualities of it. Another professor that I can reference is Professor Graham Young. He's a landscape architect. I'm still friends with him today. Made a massive impression on me. He taught me that there are different ways of looking at landscape, qualitative and quantitative. And our role as architects are really to interpret the quantitative and the qualitative and bring that forward. So there's a lot of potential in landscape. It's really instrumental. After my first degree, my undergraduate, I landed very prestigious role in a small but very design-focused firm called Comrie Wilkinson. And at that time, Henry Comrie was studying towards a PhD in urban design at Oxford Brookes or Greenwich, I can't remember. And Chris Wilkinson was the architect whom I worked with, and we actually became best friends. He's 10 years older than me, became my mentor. Henry Comrie was also instrumental in forming ideas about cities at an undergraduate level. And then my best friend, Gary White, who taught me urban design in my third year. They're all good friends. And so naturally, we would all become good friends. You see where we are going. You spend a lot of time together in the office, and they taught me a great deal about architecture and urbanism. Chris has got a unique way of approaching design, almost like Carlos Scarpa. At that time, Professor Ora Hubert, Henry Comrie, and Chris Wilkinson had a joint venture where we did a lot of work on, incidentally, the Union Buildings by Herbert Baker. So there was a little bit of conservation. There was a lot of very sort of Scarpa-esque approach to adding new work and layering, tabula plana. And it was just, for me, the most amazing place to be in as a young person, as a young architect. It really, up to today, even up last night, I would refer to notes from back in the day, what I learned from these individuals.
I think it would be an understatement to say that obviously you come off as a very passionate designer. No question. Absolutely. I have seen many designers that invariably start out of university with a very similar sort of vision and rigor to architecture. Would it be fair to say that somewhere down the line, you've had to almost at an institutional level preserve that passion and rigor in order to avoid it from being eroded from the pace at which architecture can work here? For example, you see a lot of people lose the spark, and it eventually then becomes a point of, oh, let's just get it out the door. Let's just get the spec out the door. And I feel, whenever I see and hear that, it becomes a bit depressing for me. But
Of course,
you've obviously been able to preserve that for, a very long time. So do you think there's anything that you do? Obviously you have clearly a support system of a very tight group of creative individuals, but for someone who doesn't have that, how would you think they can go about preserving that passion?
Alan, I think it's a very good question. And even in my career, I've seen it as well, that, you get very brilliant people who get exposed to the wrong things at the wrong time. I often tell students it's important to work, but it's even more important to work for the right firm. Because if you get applied, I suppose, in the wrong things at the wrong time, you would grind to a halt. For me, everything I do is really connected to agency, and that really relates to the values that I hold dearly for what we do. And so it's more of a calling for me than just a profession or just a job. I tell all the guys here, I certainly don't, and I don't expect them to just work to get a salary. I mean, that would be disheartening, to be incredibly euphemistic about it. You come to work to learn things. And the beautiful thing with architecture is that it's connected, at least in part, to a creative process, of which I've alluded to earlier, that there's not really a right and wrong way to approach that on a conceptual level. And it's so multifaceted that there is, especially today with new tools being developed, it's an extremely progressive environment. There is literally new things to learn every day. And with that, there are new value chains that you can connect to agency and give you purpose to come to work every day and to learn. And so it really is actually quite a rewarding discipline to be part of.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I've also found another way that, at least for me, the way that I kind of keep the spark alive, so to speak, is actually through academia. And I know that we spoke about this, kind of before the episode started, but when we knew you were coming on, that was kind of the first parallels that I could draw with myself and, yourself, which is you've had obviously a very good career, no doubt, but always had the sort of balance of academia as well, kind of almost going in parallel, so to speak. I know how that benefits me as a designer, but I'm curious to know how that benefits you. Obviously, there's exposure to, progressive thinking and talent and so on. But is there anything else? What would motivate you to continue teaching or to teach, at a different time of life?
I think fundamentally, we're in the service of others, right? I mean, that's part of my value chain and agency, is that I'm not here just doing things for my own purpose, but I'm really in the service of others. So with that as a purpose, you're actually a teacher every day to younger staff, to younger designers, to maybe people on other teams. And I think what academia has done is it's developed in me the ability to see the potential of somebody's ideas and to curate that into existence. And with that comes an enormous amount of gratification, seeing somebody grow. Some of the very obvious advantages would be in South Africa when we taught. We were invited as external examiners for the final year panel at universities. On many occasions, we taught some of those students in undergraduate years. So we could always identify top talent and handpick them to come and work for our firm. We've had some incredible graduates through our office. I'm proud to say that many of them have gone on to become directors, design directors, and curators of their own practice. And I mean, that's the obvious benefits. But standing back and like now, if I think about somebody like Walter Obenheimer or Cliff Goos, who worked with me, and Marguerite for long, and seeing what they've achieved, it's really one of my top accolades, is the little bit of reflection I see in somebody else who have grown into a role. And we see this in the office every day. We have, I would like to say, have a hand-picked group of really talented people. I'm humbled every day by their abilities, not just to ring together and pull off like really good work, but their incredible ability to learn new skills, learn new workflows, grow, shape. It's not always easy. I mean, with a growth mindset, you're not supposed to feel comfortable.
Yep.
Because you have to be outside the comfort zone.
Absolutely.
And to see somebody go through a difficult process and grow as a designer is extremely rewarding.
Yeah. Agree completely. Growth mindset, you've kind of given me permission to start a rant. I'm a big advocate of growth mindset. In fact, I can even attribute it to being one of the reasons why most people eventually get tired of architectures, because they don't have that mindset. Is because like you alluded to earlier, I mean, obviously now there's a clear sort of, change in, design workflows with, things like AI and so on. But if you think about it, I suppose with a more holistic approach, architecture has always been a sort of dynamic field, which has always evolved. I mean, obviously, if you go back a couple of decades, you had the pen and paper, and then there was a whole shift to, the digital, AutoCAD way of doing things. And now, of course, there's, a whole other workflow process. And probably in the next decade, there'll be entirely something else. So if you don't have that growth mindset, I don't think you'll progress much, which is a shame. But if you do have that, like you said, I think you'll have a very fulfilling career. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think one thing that I've come to really understand in the last year and a half, obviously closing down our practice in South Africa, moving house, family, daughters, everything to a new country, starting over has come with. It was sometimes quite challenging to find our feet. And I think definitely in this environment, that growth mindset is very important to have, that maybe not just only on a career level, but also on a personal level. I understand that true growth happens outside the comfort zone, and outside the comfort zone, you are confronted with new problems and how to solve them. And being a designer, you're always looking at new and optimal ways of finding creative solutions for sometimes creative problems.
Yep.
And with a growth mindset, you should actually say, well, you know what? I don't want to have it easy. In fact, I want to go where it's difficult, because that is where I'm going to grow.
True.
And so definitely the move for us from South Africa to Dubai has represented that exponentially. I think I have grown tremendously as a creative thinker over the last 18 months. And I've been surrounded by like-minded people who are there for the growth and who appreciate that, it's trying sometimes, but it's not comfortable. It's not supposed to be comfortable, because that's not where the growth is.
Yeah. If I may, I mean, I would not like to step boundaries, but I am curious though. Clearly, that's something which many people wouldn't do, to kind of uproot your life, so to speak, and not just, your own, but your partners, your families, and so on. But even if you have to do that, I suppose my question is, why Dubai? I mean, if you had to, you could go anywhere in the world if you had to, but why Dubai?
Good question, Alan. And it's got a bit of a long answer, but I think when we were in South Africa, we were in a unique situation. But pre-COVID, we stepped back from a big practice and started working in teams. So we moved our family to a small coastal town in South Africa. Beautiful. If you ever have the opportunity to go to South Africa, you have to go to Knysna. It's a small coastal town, old English naval town. Before that, it was my forefathers, the French Huguenots, settled as farmers in the region. And before that, obviously, it was the landscape of the Khoi. And it's an amazing place to live. It's a small town, 70,000 people, beautiful sunrises, spectacular sunsets. And it was good for us as a family to live there for 4 years and really sort of bond. But the one thing that I did miss at the time, myself and Marguerite wanted to pursue studies towards PhDs, and this was before COVID. So you couldn't do that from Knysna. It was just too far to travel. It was just too remote. After COVID, everything was online. And in Knysna, I had the time to reflect on sort of a global discourse on architecture, urbanism, and particularly climate change. I would think sort of really progressive thoughts on what does making a new city mean, and central discussions on that sort of led me to the Middle East, where especially in the UAE, the region, the Middle East region in Saudi, there's an extremely well-informed client with a really well-shaped future vision for its people. It's extremely progressive. And when I was given the opportunity to participate in that, I was contacted by our regional director, AK Saudi, who said, listen, we are working on these projects and it's really, really exciting space to be in. And we would like for you to join us. You don't get opportunities like that. Not where I come from. It's almost like everything I've done up to that time has prepared me for this moment. And so it really didn't take much to say yes. The discussion, the projects, the clients, the region, climate, the whole approach to people and place and sensibility. And then the incredible drive to get it done today. Rimkula said that it takes too long to make architecture. The process is just it takes 5 years to build a building. There's something wrong with that process. And so
the Middle East said, we'll fix that.
Well, the Middle East said, we'll fix that tonight. And it's amazing to be part of this extremely rapid evolving environment, not just in terms of discourse and people having critical conversations about place, but also, in terms of how we attack things like workflows and creative process. Certainly, you've mentioned AI earlier, and just being involved with teams who are on the forefront of thinking like that in a design studio. I mean, the first thing we do is empathize and understand our clients' problems and then ideate, prototype. I'm very proud to say that, I'm in a design studio with incredibly competent and capable team. And even in our design studio and our leadership and management, we are also future focused. And so ideation and prototyping, that's so much part of our process that we literally go from Rhino to 3D printing in the same day, almost in the same moment. And so being involved with a team like that and everything that's happening at the moment, it's just, I have an intense fear of missing out. So I'm glad to say that
explains a lot.
I feel really privileged to be in the environment where we are rapidly evolving.
Yep. My sort of input on that would be, again, as an architect, again, like we spoke off air, the Middle East is pretty much all I know. It's been insane the amount of development that's happened. Unfortunately, I wasn't really in the field when the so-called 2003-4 boom of Dubai was. I wasn't practicing at that time, but the minute I started practicing, I've always heard architects talk about, oh man, that was the time. I mean, to take a city from where it was to where it is now, the kind of thinking that was there, never seen it done like that before, and the vision of the government and the support behind it, next level, worldwide, not seen anything like that. And at the time I used to always think, oh man, I missed out. And over the last couple of years, again, we spoke about this off the mic, but I think our neighbors down in Saudi are really pushing boundaries now. I mean, many of the projects obviously have received, I suppose, bad press to some extent. Some have received very good press. Having you being a participant in that environment, I know that you alluded to, having clients who are very well informed, but could you maybe give us a bit more of insight into that market? Because there may be other designers worldwide like yourself who maybe just see the news and see, publications, but don't actually get a grasp of what's happening on the ground. So if you could talk to them, what would you tell them?
Well, maybe Alan, I just start by saying 2 years ago, I thought of myself as a very sort of traditional architect. I had very traditional workflow. In my previous practice, the nature of the work was different and it was much more self-referential and I suppose self-authored. I would sketch something out and then develop with a team from a sketch to a very formative balsa wood model. And then from the balsa wood model, we would go into maybe some sort of 3D modeling and have small little ideation circles and developing something. But it was a very traditional, handmade, a material act of making.
Right.
And in the Middle East, the way that we work with projects, the scale is just completely different. The nature of the work is different. And so there is no real author or self-author. There is a seed idea. Normally it's instilled in a party diagram. And then there are many collaborators who take this and shape shift and add their own value. And so we curate a process. Talking about the environment and the clients, it's such an unbelievable environment to be part of at the moment because it's so enriched in future thinking. To use an example, at the Morne Pienaar, it was highlighted that some of the projects in Saudi are pushing the idea of zero gravity urbanism. Of course, there are high profile people connected to ideas that won competitions that went over and became projects and are now really part of that signature portfolio of giga projects in Saudi. And that's all. I mean, it's supposed to be a talking point, right? I mean, it's an incredible discourse and obviously people have different opinions on it. And I don't suppose there's a right or wrong. What is remarkable about it is that somebody's putting that on the table and say, let us investigate that. There are some minds behind that can really put some serious research behind that to say that, why can't this be disruptive in a new way of thinking about urbanism?
Yep.
Why can't we think about it this way? If not, why not? And I mean, just that whole, I quite like the idea of it being in slightly disrupted sort of discourse, and people asking critical questions like that, the way of living in urbanism, the way of living in a landscape, the way humans' relationship, to landscape and how we form that around us. The Japanese have a word they call ma. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No, I haven't.
So that's sort of the pause between things, the space between elements. Sort of like if you look at a paragraph, that would typically be the gap between the words or the space between the paragraphs. And there's for me, that's where the magic is. It's where you have got
a different pause.
Different disciplines overlapping in that space. That's really where the interesting conversation is, because where we are thinking, the way we are thinking about that now at the moment is that what is the relationship of urbanism to human-centric architecture? What's the overlap with landscape architecture? What is the relationship between these three things?
Right.
And that taken into a bigger discourse takes you to the projects that we are pursuing with extremely well presented, thought through ideas. So really fundamentally, I think it's an interesting environment to be in because of the questions it's posing. And there's not really a right or wrong, I suppose. It's just an unbelievable environment to be part of.
Interesting. I speak to obviously designers and architects like yourself in that space, and everyone comes off with pretty much what you said, which is whether you are a fan or not, whether you like it or not, agree or not, whatever it is, but the fact that someone's actually, like you very appropriately put, someone's putting these ideas on the table for discourse. I think that is the most important. And I think we should have more of those conversations. I think that, I don't know, maybe this is just my opinion, but I feel like as architects, especially over time, you kind of tend to get opinionated. You sort of form your opinion, and then that becomes the bedrock of all other, sort of the glass that you see the world through, which is not always the case. Again, going back to, growth mindset, that glass should probably evolve over time.
Of course.
But I completely agree. Thank you so much for that insight.
Yeah, I suppose if you are, like I told you, I think as architects, I've always thought of architects as like really visionary people, people that have in high esteem an idea about people in place.
Yeah.
A vision, or almost like Corb's vision for Paris, that was extremely provocative and thought-provoking at its time. We read about that and we studied that in architecture. And here we are, 2023, and we're inside that now. Sort of we are part of that. It's our projects and we are working on it. And so I think for me personally, having started this conversation about being a traditional architect, I think the real value is standing back and understanding that there are other opinions as well, and they're all valid, and we should consider them and look at the possibilities. The real value of, I think, of these projects here and what we are seeing. So, yeah.
Agreed completely. As we sort of reach the conclusion of this episode, so to say, we've spent a lot of time talking about, obviously your journey, everything that's led us and led yourself to where we are now. And typically at this point is when I like to almost start to become forward thinking. And I would love to know from someone like yourself, what's next for you? I mean, what inspires you? What do you want to be involved in over the next year or two? What are you thinking about? What's ahead of you?
Well, I think for me personally, it feels like, I told you earlier, it's almost like everything I've done before has prepared me for this moment. And so I really resonate with people, and team for me is really important.
Right.
And I think I'm fortunate enough to be in an environment where people are valued and their contributions are valued. So we almost have this handpicked team of extremely talented designers and delivery architects. And we've got an extremely future-focused management and leadership. And Jacobs, we've got an incredible profile, international profile. And for me, the amazing space to be in is in the teams that we have, on the projects that we have, and leading them and guiding them on design and delivery questions and projects. I think having learned to know the team the way I have, and having seen their growth over the last 2 years, it's been on a personal level extremely rewarding for me, almost like lecturing at varsity, that human connection and seeing somebody grow and develop new skills and abilities. Ultimately, for me, is the biggest reward. I think we have got a profile. Our regional director is extremely talented, and he's got a vast profile of really good work. That, coupled with our management's forward-thinking, future-focused approach to new projects, we are really in a position to get very, very interesting projects. And having the team in the studio and having our workflows just developing every day, the most amazing thing for me is at the end of the day, I'm a creative, right? So it's rewarding for me at the end of the day if I have a drawing or a model or a rendering or something that I can take home with me.
Yep.
So I like that, the physicality of having a creative output.
Yep.
And I mean, just to sit here and look at these 3D models that the team printed the last month, it's extremely rewarding. So I think this is definitely the place to be for me. The projects we are getting and the team that we've got is it's like the planets aligning.
Nice.
So I'm really excited what's going to happen, not just in the next 2, 4, 6, or in the next 15 years, but really even next week. I mean, our world and our approach to design thinking is evolving so quickly that, every day is almost unfolding as a new chapter in this book. I mean, I can use an example. I was reading on the creative workflows associated with another creative discipline, graphic design. And typically what happens with that in larger organizations similar to ours is the design process is curated. So there's normally a seed idea, and then a design director or a team lead or would curate the process through workflows and different people. There's no single author. It evolves through a creative process. And I was reading about how design team would curate the design of a piece of fashion and how they had to always go and regenerate if something small was wrong. It was not quite possible to go back and do
just to fix a small thing.
Yeah, and I was thinking about the same way that we employ AI to communicate design, and it's almost like you have to, every time you write a new prompt, you have to reinsert the prompt, and you would get 4 new outcomes. It was not something like micro changing.
Right.
And the very next day, Adobe launched Firefly.
Exactly.
So
I was just going to build to that. I'm like, surely he knows about Firefly.
I was amazed because I was reading that whole week on how we have to redo central workflows to get to new results. And it's almost like a never ending series of graphic ideation. And all of a sudden, the next day, there's Adobe Firefly. I thought, goodness me, how can things evolve so quickly? Of course, I think what's very important and part of that conversation is that AI is wonderful. I think people have different opinions on it. I think there's a level of empathy and understanding that human beings bring to the making of something really meaningful.
Yep.
And so I always think back to Professor Ora Ubar, who instilled so much of herself in her work, and how that resonates with me is that I think design is a very, very personal process. And I think it's very project specific, time and place specific. It's a little bit like making a record, right?
Mm-hmm.
In 1991, when they made the Black Album, those guys came together in that time, in that studio,
Exactly.
with a producer and a record company. Even the timbre in the studio in which the drum tracks were played and recorded gave it a certain signature.
Exactly.
And that's very much what happens here. So every project is unique. It's nice to stand back in a big organization and see, I see a little bit of that guy who worked on the project in that. I can see it in the models. I can see this in the presentation. This is where one of my team came in and they made their magic on the diagrams, and it led us to understand that. I always look for the human touch in that. Even if we use AI to optimize, ideate, prototype, I'm always looking for that little bit of imperfection that comes from humans. I suppose the next thing they'll do is code something from AI that builds in imperfections. It's a little bit like music. I don't know if I'm not musical at all, but if you think on how music is made, that it could never be 100% precise. There's almost a little bit of modulation inside that.
In fact, it might sound a bit weird if it was 100%.
Exactly. Correct. It would sound, almost machine made, right?
Yes.
So I resonate with that. Yeah, I really resonate with that. And so I think fundamentally for me, the people are important. I'm all about the team and the team development. So like I said, everything that I've done before, I feels like it's prepared me for this role. And formative years in South Africa, having lectured, and maybe my interest in people and how they develop, and maybe this idea of being in service of others are all contributing to the fact that it's just for me so rewarding to be part of the growth of the team and to see the unbelievable work that we are doing.
Yeah. I mean, again, for someone like myself who's a relative outsider, I suppose, to Jacobs, just being on premise, so to speak, and being in the presence of, for example, the malls that we have around us, you can tell that there's inspiring talent around. I mean, it's very evident, right? And I can only imagine how fulfilling that must be to work with on the daily.
Oh, absolutely.
So I obviously, keep doing what you're doing. I mean, this episode has been one of at least my most inspiring episodes. It's so different talking to different designers and finding what motivates them and what kind of gets the juices flowing.
Yeah.
Everyone has a different process. Everyone has, different, things that inspire them. And I'm glad that for someone like yourself, it is about, the team and the people behind it, and, actually becoming a sort of framework for talent, if you may, and not being the talent, which is a whole other different conversation, but still, yeah. So we have a bit of a closing tradition on the podcast, which has been fairly well received, I would think. Essentially what it is it's a question that's put forward by one of our previous guests, completely blind. So you wouldn't know who asked the question, and the person who asked the question doesn't know who's going to receive it. Almost like a lottery.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And sometimes they're a bit weird, and sometimes they're just a bit of fun. So I think the one that you've drawn today is a bit of fun. So the question for you is, could you name a book that you are reading or a book that you have read which has inspired you as a designer or an architect? So you can take your time with it. It's not a quick sort of rapid fire question.
Really tough one.
Yeah. I mean, now that I think of it, I'm like, what would I say? Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Suppose it doesn't have to be a design book also, right? I mean,
No.
yeah,
I hardly ever read books on architecture. They say never judge a
book by its cover.
no, don't judge a book by its movie. I think.
Or did you see the movie first and then read the book?
Yeah, I'm thinking now of books, especially on design. I remember a book that was a collection of conversations between Louis Kahn and his students. I don't remember the name of the book. I had the beautiful biography captured on film of Louis Kahn. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No.
So that was a movie that came from a book, suppose, and as well as Louise Bargan, The Complete Works. Those two as films, but I remember being a student and reading a book that was a collection of conversations between Louis Kahn and his students. And one of the conversations was the lengthy, drawn out discussion about the quality of light. And I think thinking about what we discussed this afternoon and the relationship between a mentor and a mentee, about the relationship between a student and a lecturer, the relationship, and even me with a mentor, like the wonderful mentors that I've had. Those are some of seminal discussions that you read somebody's ability to sit for hours and talk about the quality of light. That one conversation about the quality of light has probably informed me more than anything I learned in university, because what happened in this discussion, I think they were discussing the Exeter Library by Kahn, and they were talking about light, and Kahn was referring to light as a material and how it is used in a calculated way.
Oh.
It's not used all over. It's, if you look at, like, I don't know, my favorite type of architecture has got something that's got a lot of plan density and darkness and lightness. Pianoforte, there's this drama to it. It's not all overexposed and it's not all dark and underlit. And this one conversation dealt about the quality of light. And many, many years ago, I remember recalling that conversation of Kahn with his student on calculating light as a material that's part of the vocabulary when you design architecture. And I came to the realization that for the architecture that really resonates with me, light is applied as in a calculated way. And I told the students the next day in class that you can probably refer to it as a source and an effect. And the way I like to look at light in architecture is I like to see the effect of the light, but not the source itself. And that led me to believe that I really love sun-shy windows. So if I'm inside a building and I can see the sun from the inside, the light, as sometimes with acoustics, is not properly applied. There is some magic that comes with bringing light into a space in a very calculated way. Where I come from in South Africa, the moment you get sunlight on glass, you get thermal heat gain and you get ineffective spaces and glare. In the Middle East, we solve that technically by having high-performance glass. But I think to summarize what you were asking is not necessarily a book. It's that one phrase, which is a discussion between Kahn and a student about the quantity of natural light.
Oh, that's a very inspiring answer. I myself I've never really thought of light as a material. I mean, the minute you start thinking of it as a material, you think, oh, but okay, how can I bend it and mold it and shape it and add layers of it or peel it back or, wow, I've never really thought of light that way.
It's very interesting. People are drawn to phototropic quality. And so it's a little bit like a coral reef. If I can use an analogy, people are drawn to areas where there's natural daylight. And as Kahn did, where you have people moving, crossing spaces or moving vertically from one floor to the other, if you adorn those spaces with natural light, creates an incredible beauty. And if you think about it, it's a space that's rendered dynamically because it's changing all the time.
True.
How amazing is that?
It's awesome. Morne, it's been inspiring talking to you.
Thank you, Alan.
Without a question. I always leave these episodes, with a lot to think about, and today is no different.
I'm glad.
So on behalf of the show, I would like to obviously thank you for your time. I keep hammering this back home. The show is only possible with people like yourself donating your time and having these conversations. And hopefully this inspires someone listening to the show. So again, on behalf of our team, thank you so much for your time.
Alan, thank you very much for having me.
No worries. And for the rest of you guys, we will catch you guys next week. Fellow aFormer, thank you so much for your time. If this episode added any value to you, please share it with anyone who may benefit. If you want to carry on the discussion, please get in touch with us over socials. We are at aForm Show on the gram and hello@aform.studio on email. That is at aForm Show on the gram and hello@aform.studio on email. Until next time, stay inspired.